Maybe. Hi, this is Miss Litton. Say hi.
Hi.
This is Chapter 36, Body Fluid Regulation, Excretory Systems. Did I pull up the right chapter? Is this AP? Yes, it is. Yay. Okay, so our whole thing here in this chapter about maintaining homeostasis is that amount of water coming in is equal to the water coming out. And then different organisms are in different environments which could impact that, or impact them. Are they on land? Are they in water? Are they in fresh water? Are they in salt water? Do they use their excretory system for things other than water balance? Do they use it to get rid of nitrogenous waste? Those are all the different things that we looked at. Now, when we talked about body fluid regulation, one of the first things we discussed was dealing with nitrogenous waste, and we looked at creatine phosphate, right? Creatinine, we looked at uric acid, but the biggest nitrogenous waste we need to be concerned about is dealing with amino acids that we cannot use or transform into something else. So in our liver, we do something called deamination. Deamination removes this group right here. Then you have a choice, depending on what kind of organism you are. If you don't want to do a lot, expend a lot of energy, leave it as ammonia. But that's very, very toxic, so you need a lot of what to go with it? Water. If you want to spend a little energy with another ammonia and a CO2, you can make urea. And that's what our liver does for us, is it makes urea for us, the formation of urea. And that takes a little energy, but you don't have to have as much water in the process of excretion. If you want to have like no water, basically, and have it as a precipitate out, then convert it to uric acid. And that takes more energy, but then no water is basically no water for excretion. They mix uric acid like with fecal material, and that just goes out one exit. So we looked at different organisms, the different strategies that they use. If you're going to do something like be a mammal, a placental mammal, then you can use urea, and you can have that urea cross the placenta, and then whoever the mom can just excrete it with their urinary excretions. But if you're somebody who lays an egg, you better convert it all the way to uric acid. If you have copious amounts of water, you can leave it as ammonia. We then looked at some other strategies. We looked at flame cells with planarian. We looked at nephrostome and nephridia in segmented worms. And now that you know the end of the story, because we have studied our nephrons that are in us, we can see the similarities with the blood pathway and the urine pathway side by side. We looked at Malpighian tubules, which is something that insects use. We discussed the process of salt water versus fresh water, and we looked at the different adaptations for both of those scenarios, where you have a lot of fresh water, and it's a very hypotonic environment around you. Water's going to want to flow in, so you can afford to have copious amounts of urine. In fact, you worry about too much water coming in, and also the loss of salts, because your body's going to be hypertonic. The fresh water is going to be what? Hypotonic, so your salts are going to want to go out. So you have to actively put those back in. Whereas when you deal with the marine fish, their big concern is loss of what? Loss of water, right? Because their body will be hypotonic in relationship to the hypertonic salt water, and also gaining too many salts, so they have to get rid of those salts. We looked at some other strategies like invertebrates. They're basically isotonic to salt water. We looked at chondriichthyes like shark. They keep a really high level of what? Urea. That's okay. I've done it a few years. They keep a high level of urea, and so that's how they make themselves isotonic to the ocean water, so they don't lose the water that they need to maintain homeostasis. There's a little chart. We looked at other osmoregulators. Go away. We looked at osmoregulators like salmon that move between fresh water and salt water. Okay, so that was our overview. Then when we get on land, if you looked at it like you were a plant and you looked at water potential, you are always going to have a higher water potential than your surrounding environment. And so your concern is going to be loss of water. So you look at ways water comes in, and we said water comes in through ingestion, drinking, eating. And also we have water as a result of metabolism. Why do I say water as a result of metabolism? Due to what?
Due to cellular respiration.
Cellular respiration. Who catches the electrons at the bottom? No. Oxygen forming water. So every oxygen you breathe in becomes a water molecule, right? Becomes a water molecule because that oxygen is going to be reduced by the electrons in the electron transport chain to hydrogens forming water. So ingestion and metabolism. And then water out, these are all the ways. Evaporation from our skin, our lungs, excreting, urinating, and feces. So we looked at a few ways that our body fluid is regulated and all the aspects that it's regulated. And our liver, our skin, our kidney, our lungs, our gut are all involved in water regulation. When we talk about our kidneys, though, we're going to talk about getting rid of nitrogenous waste through the excretory process. Things like a kangaroo. Do you want that back?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Things like a kangaroo rat are unique in that they don't have to drink water. That's a great adaptation. They get all the water they need from the metabolism of the grains they eat. We looked at other terrestrial organisms. They have a salt gland. He's really glad he has a salt gland. I know that's why he's thinking that. We looked at skin adaptations, variations between an amphibian and a reptile. We looked at tardigrades or water bears, I think is what they're called. I forgot to show this the other class period.
But fifth period got it.
Who got it fifth period? Yeah, I totally forgot about my side note. And the key thing here was, see, the side note was not, it was too much side, not enough note. But they looked at it, was something like 10 years, right? Am I looking? That one had been revived after, 3 decades, 30 years, a tardigrade had gone into anhydrobiosis. We looked at camels. And do you remember what was in the camel nose I told you about? It same thing in the bird lungs and fish gills. Countercurrent. Yeah. But this time, what they're trying to do is recover water. Whereas in the gills of fish, they were trying to acquire oxygen out of the water. And when we looked at the birds, they were trying to acquire oxygen out of the air, right? And the blood was running countercurrent. Blood is running countercurrent here as well, but it's trying to acquire water. All right, so those were all of our different strategies, and then we moved into the human system. And we looked at it macroscopically. If I said, how many vessels are connected to a kidney, what would you tell me? 3. What are the 3 vessels connected to your kidney? Renal artery, renal vein, and a ureter. Right? What is the renal artery bringing the kidney? Oxygenated, dirty blood, right? Dirty oxygenated blood. The renal vein has clean deoxygenated blood. So let's think about where things went. The dirty oxygenated blood, the dirty part is going out the ureter. The oxygen is going to the cells of the kidney. Kidney is supplying CO2, deoxygenating, it's returning via the renal vein, right? So the cleaning part goes out the ureter. And the ureter drains into the bladder, and the bladder into the urethra and out, right? Macroscopically, if we looked at a kidney and did a cross-section of it, we would see 3 parts to it: cortex, medulla, and pelvis. In the cortex and part of the medulla is where you have your millions of nephrons in each kidney. And they are the functional unit of the kidney, just like the alveoli are the functional units of the lungs, okay? And so your nephrons are embedded in here, and the blood's gonna come in oxygenated and dirty and leave clean and deoxygenated. So let's start looking at one of these nephrons, and this is one of those conditions where you have 2 capillaries, and each capillary serves a purpose. The first capillary, which is known as the glomerulus, which is a ball of capillaries, that's where you have what take place? Starts with an F. Filtration. Okay? So when you filter, anything that's small enough will go out of the glomeruli and into the glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule. But that means good and bad. You know, if I dump out my purse, I'm dumping out trash, but I'm also dumping out my Amazon Prime card, okay? and cash money, maybe, So there's good and, house keys and car keys. There's some things of real value to me. I cannot throw all of that away and go, oh, clean purse, okay? That will be very detrimental to me. So I have to get some things back. And so that part of it is called, so you have glomerular filtration, and then you have tubular, oh, hey. Hi, sweetheart, miss you. Okay, okay. And then I have tubular reabsorption. That's where I put my car keys back in my wallet, and in my purse, and everything else back into my purse. You want to tell me I got up this morning? No, normally I get up now about 4:07, 4:10.
Oh my God.
So what was it like?
Oh.
3:07.
It was
3:10. That's what it was like for me.
I had another hour of sleep.
That's when I go to the gym.
Okay.
Because I have to get ready.
That's motivation.
Wait, you woke up at 3:07?
No, I woke up at 4:07, but because of the time
Yeah.
change, it's like 3:07.
Wait, when did you go to sleep?
I went to sleep around 9:30ish.
You go to bed earlier than we do.
I go to bed at
Yeah.
9:30.
That's a new strategy on my part.
I like sleeping.
It was like 6 hours.
Yeah, it's hard, but I really try hard because I want to stay up till 10:30 or 11 is what I want to do, but then getting up at 4:07.
And then
I had to change it from 4:20 because I just can't say 4:20 because it just sounds like, oh, 4:20, just, I'm tired. Okay, so, anyway, so, tubular reabsorption, the genie's out, so you're here. I think you released the genie.
I'm glad to know.
Yeah. Tubular reabsorption, so you have to take the good stuff back. Water, glucose, those things have to get back. The tricky thing is there's no water pump, right? And you always know, cannot actively transport water, so we're going to have to motivate it to move. How will we motivate? We can pump what? What
Salt.
can we pump? Salt. And we just get water to follow it, okay? So glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, take what we want, and then some stuff's just harder to get out of our blood. We have to actively transport it out of our blood. Might be a toxin, a poison, something that we need to get out, and that is called tubular secretion. Then, put everything out, took back what we want, and then actively said, get rid of this, get rid of this. That's what we will urinate out, okay? So let's take a look at a nephron and a little more. That would be the simple version of everything. Let's go into a little more depth, okay? So glomerular filtration is here. Good stuff and bad stuff goes out. At the proximal convoluted tubules, proximal closer, proximal convoluted tubules, 67% of all salt, so 67% of all water follows it. So that's a good recovery. Still death for us. That spells death if we just peed out the rest of that water. Okay, it's so critical. So salt and water. Then when you go down the descending loop of Henle, only what? Water. When you go up the ascending, only salt. And then at the other, now the distal convoluted tubule, same thing as here, except it's salt and water. And something gets, what happens there? Tubular secretion. This is when you actively transport things into the tube that you want to make sure you pee out. Does that make sense? Okay, then we go down. Whenever we go down, what comes out when we go down? Water. So water. Okay, so it's salt and water, water, salt, salt and water, water. Both of your downs. This is a down and this is a down. Water. Up tops, salt and water. Going up, just salt. Yes?
Where's the second part where salt and water absorb?
Okay, so proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule. So salt and water, only salt. Salt and water, water, and, oops, peed a little bit of urea. Yes?
So for the tubular secretion, what is the most?
It will happen in other places, but this is the most is secreted in there. Maybe it's hydrogen ions because you're. Yeah, it's coming out of your blood and into the pee tube. I am secreting it into the tube.
Okay.
I want to pee this out. This is, in my analogy of cleaning out a purse, this would be like me actively trying to get gum that's stuck in my purse. Like that's trash, but it didn't fall out with the glomerular filtration. So I need to work at getting it out.
So you're putting salt and water out and you're bringing
No. Okay, well, yes. So out of this P tube right here, I'm going to pump salt out, and then water's going to follow it, and then any bad stuff that I do not want in my blood is going to go into the P tube. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's the tubular, that's this part. Okay, it's like, I do not want this in my blood anymore. I'm getting rid of it. Could be a toxin, it could be creatinine. Remember we talked about creatinine as being a nitrogenous waste. It could be some hydrogen ions. I'm trying to reestablish the pH of my blood, something like that. Okay? All right. Now, this part right here, this part right here is impacted by a hormone, ADH. ADH stands for Antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone. What antidiuretic hormone will do is it will make this tube reabsorb, makes it more leaky, and you reabsorb even more water. If I reabsorb more water, I pee less, I urinate less. So if ADH is up, my total amount of urine is down because I removed water out of that tube. I've recovered water. And that's why we say things like diuretics, like caffeine, okay, would be the opposite of that. So diuretics are the opposite. I wouldn't pee less, I would pee more, is a diuretic. Alcohol is a diuretic. I pee more if I drink alcohol. All right with that? Okay. Now, we learned some other things too. On the glomerulus, do you remember there was the afferent arteriole going in and the efferent arteriole going out of the glomerulus? Do you remember talking about that?
Yes.
Okay. And right here, this afferent arteriole, if there is low blood pressure at the afferent arteriole, remember, glomerular filtration works on having high enough blood pressure to force things out, right? So you could have too low of a blood pressure. That could be bad. So when that happens, when you have low blood pressure sensed in your afferent arteriole, then you will start to secrete renin. Okay? Renin will make something from the liver. This triggers then the liver. Do you remember this part? Angiotensinogen, right? And then the liver secretes that, and angiotensinogen, due to renin, becomes angiotensin 1. Then something called ACE from the lungs makes it go to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 makes the gland sitting on top of the kidneys, right here, makes your adrenal gland secrete aldosterone, and aldosterone triggers sodium reabsorption, thirst, more water reabsorption, and that will help elevate more salt, more water, higher blood pressure. So then it'll turn the sensor off. It'll say, oh, okay, good. No more renin, because this would be an example of negative feedback, right? The self-correction, coming back to the set point. Now I'm able to have the right amount of blood pressure. Conversely, if my blood pressure is too high, then my heart will detect that coming into my atria, and then it is ANH, and it'll say, and I always think like enough, that stop, lower the blood pressure. So the heart will counteract that, all those mechanisms, because you need the blood pressure to be just right. So we talked about, let me jump to that part just because that's where I went. Okay, so when your blood pressure is high, you secrete renin. Renin makes from the liver angiotensinogen become angiotensin 1. ACE from the lungs converts it to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 makes your adrenal glands secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone makes your kidneys reabsorb more sodium, more salt, more water, and I'm thirsty. Okay, so that is one hormone that regulates it. And this is a picture listing of all the things that angiotensin causes. If you look at this diagram, scary, but let me just show it to you one more time. You can see renin and that's impacting angiotensinogen, and ultimately you get angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 gets aldosterone released from the adrenal cortex. This causes then your kidney to reabsorb more salt, more water, elevate the blood pressure. ADH comes from the posterior pituitary. We already talked about how it affects the collecting ducts and helps you to reabsorb more water. There's something called Adrenocorticotropic Hormone. This comes from the anterior pituitary. It affects the adrenal cortex and basically this aldosterone, which is a type of mineral corticoid. Okay, ANH coming here from the heart, it's going to counteract the renin, so it stops it right, so this cycle doesn't even go. It stops renin and it stops ADH. Because then you'll pee out more water, and as a result of that, that'll lower your blood pressure. So that's how it would counteract it. Okay, there are other hormones from the kidney. APBio stimulates red blood cell production. And the way I think of this is if I have more blood volume, I don't want to just have more plasma, right, by having more water. I need to have the red blood cells in there too. So let's go ahead and make the red blood cells to fill up that plasma with formed elements, right? Otherwise it'll throw that off. And then the other connection we have is calcium absorption as it relates to vitamin D. So the kidneys help activate vitamin D that you either have from the food that you ate or synthesized from sun exposure, which then increases calcium absorption. Okay, it's down there. Okay, now let's look at all the functions of the kidney because it all has to do with homeostasis. So metabolic waste, we've already discussed the urea connection. Uric acid and creatinine. Creatinine comes from creatine phosphate, which is a way we store phosphate in our muscles, and a byproduct of that is creatinine, and you pee that out. And uric acid. And remember we said, what's a disease we might be familiar with that's too much uric acid, usually because you're an overweight male who drinks alcohol and eats a lot of bacon. Then gout. Gout. Yeah, gout is increased. Okay? Water salt balance, we already know that. It's all about water movement. That's the primary role, right, is this salt and water balance. So we can see how that connection. Acid-base balance, it regulates the pH of our blood, whether it's hydrogen or bicarbonate, and it can excrete whatever it needs to excrete in order to get our pH just right. And then we talked about hormonal. EPO is what helps with red blood cell production. We talked about vitamin D, which ultimately has to do with calcium. And then we talked about triggering aldosterone, and we trigger it with renin that comes from the kidneys. So here's just a quick snapshot of the nitrogenous waste. Creatinine from creatine phosphate, uric acid comes from nucleotides. Here's a little gout for you. Remember? Hello, kidney. And we said, as we increase the salt in our blood, we increase the water, increase salt, increase water, and as you have more water, blood volume goes up, and so too does blood pressure. So salt and blood pressure are very well connected. And the kidney is impacting both of those, how much salt is reabsorbed and how much water is reabsorbed. We talked about ADH already, and we did that. I think we did it all, my friend.
I'm sure he's thinking just that.
What?
I'm sure he's thinking just that.
Yeah, I was pretty sure he was. I caught him mid-sentence. Okay, do you want to do some questions that are in here?
See.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't log in.
I haven't turned it on yet. Okay, we hope that's helpful. I'm just going to pause you for a minute. So the presence of ADH causes an individual to excrete less water, right? Because they reabsorb it. 4 of you got that. Some not so much. Okay. Excrete. Excrete means excrete, you're urinating, right? That when you're excreting that. So less water. All right, let's try. That was only one question. Let's try another one. Did I pass one? do again. Here we go. Okay, so an efferent artery exits the glomerulus. That's true. Afferent goes into the glomerulus. Efferent goes out. Number 2, filtration is associated with the glomerular filtration. Remember, tubular reabsorption, and then the distal convoluted tubule is tubular secretion. In humans, water is all of these. Yes, that is true. And by what process are most molecules secreted from the blood into the distal convolute? Active transport. You're actively transporting it from the blood, that's tubular secretion, into the tube. Okay, we struggled with that one just a little bit. Let me see if there's any more in here. I think the other one are real organism specific, so I think we're good on that one.
There is though.
There is one, but I didn't have you learn all of the different ones. That was small print. Okay, study, do the questions at the back of the book. Focus on big ticket items of it. Maybe write your essay. There's an essay over that. Those will all be great things. And if you get hungry, have a piece of toast. All right. Say goodbye. Bye.
Goodbye.